Is it possible to go from 145 per 100 to a 125 per 100 in a half Ironman in the space of 6 months? Let's take a look. Hi, Brenton Ford here from Effortless Swimming. If you're new to this channel and to these videos, I'm a swim coach based in Australia, and I work with swimmers and triathletes around the world to help them swim faster and more efficient through better freestyle technique. And I've worked with more than 6,000 swimmers at our clinics here in Australia and more than 3,000 people in our online coaching program. In August last year, I was contacted by Triathlete Josh Salley. He had started swimming in early 2022, and at that point he couldn't swim more than 25 meters, but he got himself to a point where he was able to maintain a 145 per 100, this is meters, in his triathlons, in his short distance triathlons, and he was already swimming quite well, especially in the space of 6 months. And he contacted me to help him work towards swimming faster and just becoming more efficient overall. Now here in these videos, what you might notice in these before videos, and this was in August 2022, is he did have a generally quite a good stroke. He had decent body position, head position was quite good, and for someone who'd only been swimming for 6 months, there was a lot of things he was doing well. But what we identified was there was a couple of things that were slowing him down, and he was doing some things with his catch and pull that was making him lose power and lose a lot of that propulsion that he could have. Now, a few things that we started with and worked with was just making sure that we tighten up the kick. His kick was a little bit too wide. He was kicking outside of the bucket that we like to kick in. So we worked on keeping the kick a little bit narrower and also slightly better ankle mobility, which is something he's been working on. Now, the most notable thing was what was really happening with his catch and pull. When you look at the front view, you'll see that his catch and pull was very wide. His hand was coming out a lot wider than his elbow. And so he's losing a lot of the propulsion. He was putting himself in a weaker position that wasn't set up very well to move him forwards. Now, when we go through the catch and pull, we want to keep the hand narrower than the elbow on the inside of it. Because if you think about standing on the side of the pool, pulling yourself out of the water, you wouldn't do it with your hands out wider than your elbow. That would be very weak. Have your hands on the inside of the elbow. That's going to be a much stronger position to be in if you're pulling yourself out of the water. Same thing when you swim freestyle. You've got to keep the arms in that position. So that was one of the major things that helped him have his swim times go from that 145 pace down to a consistent 125 for a set where he's doing 2100s with 30 seconds rest, constantly hitting 125s at the moment. You'll also see in his recovery above the water, as he was swimming towards us, you could see that some of the strokes were quite wide. Now, there's nothing wrong with having more of a swinging recovery over the top and not necessarily having this more bent elbow recovery. But if you swing too wide from the body, I find that it can translate to a wider catch and pull under the body, and it can throw some of your balance out. So even though we don't want to come very close to the body because that can be restrictive, we also don't want to be too wide. So somewhere in between. And what we worked on was having a slightly higher elbow recovery where there's just a bit more bend and he was lifting more through the elbow. What he was doing over the top was leading with the hand, where he was swinging the hand around out wide and the arm was too low to the water on some of his strokes. So we just worked on feeling like the elbow was the thing that was lifting out of the water and bringing the arm forwards there, which he was able to improve and change. And I feel like that helped him just tighten things up a bit, where he would keep things a little bit closer in to the center rather than being out so wide overall. And when you do that, it just keeps everything a bit more contained. So it's much easier to do the things that you need to do to be going straight forwards rather than mucking around and having these inefficient movements that are out really wide. Now, at the moment, if you have a look at him swimming here, he's got a great catch, particularly on that left arm, and the right arm's doing quite well too. And you'll also see that he's got this nice rhythm and tempo. Now, the thing that we're working on now is going from being really focusing on the technique and hyper-focused on these sort of small things to now just relaxing a bit and working on getting the stroke rate and the tempo up. Because sometimes if we focus too much on having a perfect stroke and trying to have every little thing go right 100%, we sometimes lose the stroke rate and that rhythm and tempo that can help you swim fast in triathlon. Especially for an open water swim in triathlon where conditions won't be perfect and you'll have other people around. Sometimes we just need to have a faster stroke rate. And you do see a lot of the pro triathletes, they don't have perfect strokes, and nor do they need to have perfect strokes. They are very good at maintaining a somewhat high stroke rate and being very efficient at that stroke rate, but they've got good connection through the rest of the stroke. So while there's certainly some flaws and some inefficiencies there for them, they can still get away with some of these flaws because they've got that stroke rate, they can be efficient at that stroke rate, and they can just have good connection all the way through. So now we're going slightly away from trying to perfect each part of the stroke to now just getting into flow and just focused on the effort and the rhythm in training. So that's the next step going forwards. So if you're wondering, is it possible to go from a 145 per 100 to a 125 per 100 in the space of 6 months? It certainly is. And everyone is different with how long it takes them. But what I've seen with the thousands of different swimmers that I've worked with in the last 14 years that I've coached is that it's possible if you do the work, if you do the consistent training and you're working on the right things in your training that's specific to you, then that can make a big difference going forwards.